This is how Uber was the victim of an $100 million ad fraud. Kind of a crazy story. Not that many people know about it. We're going to go into detail on how it happened. This is a warning not to light your ads budget on fire because even if you think some ad campaigns are running really well, the reports can be deceptive, and there's some very clever, manipulative people out there, and ad networks that want to get attribution and credit for your ads. So we're going to talk through how did this actually happen, how you can avoid it as well. So 2017 is a few years ago now, but more and more has come to light since then. Basically, Uber discovered that they were spending $100 million of their ad budgets that was doing absolutely nothing. So it's kind of story of how Uber got taken for a ride. They were doing at that time a ton of display advertising across a ton of networks, this type of stuff. They were trying to basically get more drivers onto the app, so they were just targeting drivers specifically, sign up, you'll get money, you'll get an initial payment, and you can drive with Uber. And back in 2017, it was kind of like a big race. They were trying, really spending a huge amount on ad spend, and they had a lot of pressure from above to generate new drivers as well. So yeah, they were spending a ton on ads, and this is how it kind of unfolded. So they first of all noticed that their display ads were being placed on controversial sites like Breitbart. So they had to make a slight cut to their marketing budget. They actually had to cut $50 million off their marketing budget to stop the ads showing on these sites. Um, and this is how they uncovered it. So the head of so these are some of the ads that were found on Breitbart at the time, and Uber got some really bad publicity for this. That's why they actually pulled the ads. And basically, Kevin Frisch, by the way, a lot of credit to this guy. Because I think a lot of people that had maybe been in this scenario would be reluctant to speak about it, especially if, because it's kind of embarrassing. Like your marketing team kind of got defrauded, scammed, you didn't notice it initially. But it was very complex. And Kevin, to his credit, has like spoken publicly about it. So yeah, have a lot of respect for him there. So initially they turned off 10%. He said it wasn't popular at the time because Delete Uber, this campaign, Delete Uber had happened. They'd lost a lot of riders, so they were under pressure from marketing. Like, we need to keep the spend high to keep the new riders coming in. He took this $50 million budget away, but the number of riders that they were acquiring did not decline, so it stayed steady. So they understandably, they couldn't understand why this was. How could that have happened? So the ad team started digging in to discover, all right, well, how could this be? Because their reports originally looked good from all of their marketing campaigns. It looked like, okay, from all of our sources, we're actually getting new drivers, we're getting conversions and new acquisitions. Um, but he says, they started digging in. They saw things that didn't make sense. Like there's an app that has 1,000 monthly active users, and apparently, in the reports that they got from this app, from this network, when they dig down, it said that there was 350,000 installs from them. Um, so just things were not making sense. So they kept peeling things back to see like what is actually going on. And they even said to us, how can we possibly be the victims of fraud? Because they do not pay, or they did not pay for views or clicks. They only paid when an actual rider took a trip in a car, um, with a new real driver to confirm that that driver was now a driver with Uber. So they had this whole system which they thought was foolproof, but they were actually the victims of attribution fraud. And we'll describe how that works. Um, that led to them turning off $100 million of spend. So like two-thirds of the spend. And they saw basically no change in the number of rider app installs. Maybe a very slight decrease, but basically no change, which suggests that it was doing nothing. It was almost worthless. And I'm going to explain how this actually happened. So basically what happened was that the ad networks were all taking credit for installs that would have happened organically. So people would have found the Uber app and installed it anyway, but they got inside the attribution path. When someone's browsing the internet, I mean, Uber was on so many websites and advertised all over the place that it would almost be difficult for someone not to actually see an Uber advert somewhere. And basically, these ad networks were getting inside of the attribution path in some very clever ways. So Kevin reveals one of the ways they did this is the ad networks would create apps like monitoring battery power, like really popular apps that people would download often. Um, and they were basically making it so that you can see here to get paid, they're generating clicks on thousands of devices so that when someone's smartphone installs the Uber app organically on their own, not after seeing the ad, if they've happened to click anywhere within the ad network, anywhere, so you know there might even be invisible ads that you've not actively clicked on, but anywhere within the ad network at all, including all these like third-party applications, then that network could get inside the attribution path and claim credit for the conversion once the user comes in, even though that the driver, like, he didn't care about, you know, he or she did not care about the ad. um, you know, they were going to become a driver organically anyway. And this is just very, very basically how it works. So you have an organic download and the attribution gets hijacked. So it sends a signal back to Uber's marketing team to say, oh yeah, this ad network was responsible for giving us this driver. But if you take that, as soon as you took the ad spend away, you saw, well, actually, there's no decrease in the level of acquisition that we're getting here. Um, and Uber paid on the first trip of a rider, not clicks. We got to remember that. Like, that was sensible for them. They're saying we don't want to pay for clicks. We only want to pay once we can see that there's a new rider coming in. But the fraudsters use these apps to simulate ad clicks just before the users downloaded Uber. So you know there's quite a few ways that people do attribution fraud. This is just one of them. Something to look out for, and it's particularly bad with apps in the App Store. And of course, Uber being primarily an application, that's how they got hit with this. Um, and Kevin first says, he says, you should start by assuming that half of what's on display channels, any display channels, is fraud. It's bot clicks, it's fraudulent, just the clicks are kind of meaningless or worthless. It is a big problem in display advertising in particular. So don't gamble your ad spend. You know, you've kind of got to know exactly what you're doing. So yeah, they turned off 100 million ad spend. They saw no drop, no noticeable drop anyway in app installs. And yeah, ultimately they got taken for a ride. What happened next was, so they actually had an agency, Fetch Media, who was going out and taking their spend to ad networks. They took them to court. They tried to sue the five ad networks. I think eventually they withdrew that complaint against Fetch, but then they got embroiled in another similar, very similar case in a very similar situation with another ad network who actually basically stole their money and was doing the same thing. And they actually won that case. So they did set a precedent that companies will fight back against ad fraud. As I said, most marketing managers, directors, they don't want to publicly speak about these things. So yeah, massive respect to the former Kevin Fish is no longer at Uber. He's at Intuit now, but a lot of respect for him for actually divulging what happened. Um, and what we can learn from this, I think, ultimately is the main thing is, this is Kevin's words, not mine. Keep an eye out for the fraud yourself. He says, your agency won't keep an eye out for the fraud, and sadly, even the folks on your own team won't do it. And you need to check the data in forensic detail. Like if something looks like it's maybe too good to be true, dive in and see, okay, is this legitimate? A lot of people now run incrementality testing, which means if you've got a new channel or you just want to test a channel, I mean, you can pull back spend and ad spend on channels just to see, okay, how does this actually impact the number of new customers we're getting? You kind of got to take a scientific approach. You can only, change one variable at a time. Maybe it's a big chunk of spend that you're withholding or placing, but that's kind of the way to do it, especially if it's a new ad network or a new platform, and you need to actually understand, okay, is this giving us any benefit? There are some complex marketing attribution tools out there. I don't think any of them have quite nailed it. And another big problem is all of the ad networks, they want to get credit. So they want to get given attribution for as much as they can, which is kind of a problem now, especially if you're advertising across 10, 20 platforms, like some of the huge brands like Uber are. the advertising across Google, Facebook, Reddit, Snapchat, all of the major platforms. So yeah, hopefully that was an interesting take, and again, respect to Kevin for kind of divulging all of this information as well.